Good morning, everyone. I am here at the Trevi Fountain, which I will show you right now. It is not lit up or flowing. I'm not sure why, but the Trevi Fountain was built in the 1700s by Nicola Salvi and finished later on by Giuseppe Panini. I had to double check that name because that's a sandwich, as you know. But anyway, I wish it were flowing. It's really pretty, and this is where you are supposed to throw a coin in so that you'll be insured of coming back to Rome, which I did on my previous trip. So I've got more coming up. I don't know if you can see me this way. Going to be visiting Nero's golden house, the Domus Aurea, which he erected after the Great Fire of 64 AD. It's supposed to be something else. All right, stay tuned. All right, welcome to an episode of Rich Speculates. So if you look at this statue right here, this, I believe, is Augustus Caesar. I would wager that the statue itself is ancient. The cornucopia seems to be a later addition, if I had to guess. But this is a perfect example of spolia. Spolia means, things that were quarried or rescued from ancient times that have then been incorporated into newer buildings. Newer meaning like medieval era and onward. So anyway, hail Caesar. Just one quick thing. Colosseum dead ahead. This is pretty much the reverse side of spolia. So the Colosseum used to be covered in white travertine marble. Apparently it would practically blind you. But over the centuries, that marble was essentially quarried and used to make other buildings here in Rome. All right, after climbing the Quirinal Hill, one of Rome's famed 7 hills, I have arrived at the Fountain of the Dioscuri. So the Dioscuri are the twins, Castor and Pollux, one of whom was the son of a god, the other was the son of a mortal, and I'm not sure how that works with twins, but they were very popular as deities, divinities among the ancient Romans, and these statues date from the time of Constantine, so early to mid 4th century. And then behind them, and sort of going all the way around here, is the palace, the Quirinal Palace, and that was the home of the popes from like 1573 to further on, it started in 1573, and then later for Italian heads of state. All right, noisy day, more to come. All right, here's something kind of cool. It is Trajan's column. Trajan was, especially at the time, regarded as one of Rome's best emperors. There used to be a maxim that said, may you be as lucky as Augustus and as effective as Trajan. They would say that to all the new emperors. Anyway, this column has engravings, and it's, in some sense like an early graphic novel. The story goes up in a spiral from the base, and it recounts Trajan's victories in the Dacian Wars. Dacia is modern Romania, pretty much. And the empire got tons of gold and silver from that conquest. And it used to have a statue of Trajan on top. This is St. Peter from behind. Here's St. Peter. And then if you go down to the very bottom, Trajan's ashes are rumored to be down there somewhere.
Has got the 6 size. Okay, so strange location. But it's fantastic also because on the top, there is a rock pieces of frame.
Hello. So if you followed me last time, you may recall I wasn't super impressed with the Colosseum, at least from the inside. It's kind of a big hole. But the outside is really interesting. And one thing I wanted to show you were the markers on each of the entry gates. So basically you would get a ticket and it would tell you, report to gate 35, and then you would find your seat from there. And then there's gate 36, and so on. So yeah, kind of cool. This very crowded spot right here is the site of the Temple of Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was assassinated elsewhere, but Mark Antony came and gave the funeral oration. Shakespeare immortalized it as friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. That's not what he said, but it was still a barn burner. And then basically the supporters of Caesar, who were numerous, took his body, built a funeral pyre right here at this spot and cremated him, which was unusual because dead bodies usually had to be disposed of outside Rome's city limits. But this is where it happened. Caesar, 23 wounds, his body went up in flames. And this legend continues. Whatever. Hello, I am coming to you from my hotel room. It's not very interesting, but it is clean and it is comfortable. So happy for that. Why am I coming to you from here? Because it's raining outside. I am prepared. I have my umbrella. I have a poncho. What I don't have is the will to go outside in the rain. It's supposed to end soon though, and then I'll head out and I will use the ticket I bought to enter the Roman Forum. The Roman Forum, of course, is the epicenter of Roman history. So I'm going to tell you about a guy named Tiberius Gracchus. Probably never heard of him, but he's a super important Roman. And his story, a big part of it, takes place in the Forum. So stay tuned. All right, I'm here in the Roman Forum. Behind me is the Arch of Septimius Severus, military strongman from the early 3rd century. But I'm at this spot, which is not very, distinctive, because this was the Rostra, which is where politicians gave their speeches. And it's in fact where Tiberius Gracchus gave his speech in the mid-2nd century BC. So who was Tiberius Gracchus? He was an aristocrat. He was a war hero. He was the first to scale the walls in the Third Punic War, where they defeated Hannibal. And in his travels through Italy, he noticed that the small farmer was dispossessed of his land. Everything had been turned into big plantations owned by the super elite, and the normal Roman citizen, the males would have to fight in the army, and back in the olden days, that was a temporary assignment for the summer. Then they would be back in time to reap the harvest. But as Rome kept expanding across the Mediterranean, their conquests grew longer, and so the army guy would get back and find that his farm had been sold or bought up. So Tiberius Gracchus saw this injustice and he wanted to fix it. So he was a tribune of the plebs. The plebiscite was a governing body. The Senate actually didn't make laws. The plebiscite did, one of the assemblies. So even though Tiberius Gracchus was incredibly wealthy and an aristocrat, he was a populist for all intents and purposes, and he had the title of tribune of the plebs, which was an elected position. And this is the rostra right around here. Rostra comes from the term for the metal spike thing that sticks off the front of a boat, so they would ram each other to try to sink boats. So anyway, this was the area where Tiberius gave his speech, and his idea was, let's get rich people off of this public land. A lot of land that was owned by the state but had been encroached and squatted upon by Roman aristocrats. Sounds pretty reasonable. They would compensate the people who were squatting for the loss of property. And you think that sounds pretty great, but the Senate aristocracy was vehemently against it. So Tiberius Gracchus stood in this area right here to drum up support for his plan. More to come. One thing I forgot to mention, and it's pretty important, is that at this spot, at the Rostra, Tiberius Gracchus had gangs, basically street gangs, who would support his position. And so violence was introduced into the Roman political system where it really hadn't been for centuries. So imagine a powerful speaker, as Tiberius was, getting the masses riled up. And to pass his land legislation, he bypassed the Senate completely. I said they didn't make laws, and they didn't. But they would typically recommend laws that the assembly would, pass and validate. Not in this case. Tiberius Gracchus kind of went around their back to get this law passed. So while that was technically legal, it violated the norms and customs, what the Romans called mos maiorum, and that was kind of a big deal. So more to come. All right, somewhere around here, I'm not exactly sure where, is the Curia, or was the Curia. The Curia is where the Senate met. And I mentioned that the Senate was very much against the reforms that Tiberius Gracchus wanted to do. That's because they felt threatened by it. Patronage was a huge part of Roman society. A successful man, a rich man, would have clients, and he would be their patron. So if they needed money, a recommendation, that sort of thing, they would go to their patron. In return, the patron could count on his clients to vote for him in elections and that sort of thing. So think about it. Tiberius Gracchus, if he's able to pass this big land reform, then all of these soldiers, all of these people will be his clients and they will support him. The Senate felt very threatened by that. So again, they thought he was being tyrannical. They always think somebody's being tyrannical. They thought he wanted king-like powers, and as we've discussed, kings are bad. So anyway, at the Senate, it was all coming to a head. The Rostra was getting fired up, all the people were getting fired up, and the Senate was getting equally fired up. So the Pontifex Maximus at the time was a guy called Nasica. Nasica was actually Tiberius Gracchus's cousin or something. Anyway, Nasica was like, we have to put a stop to this. So he and an army of senators marched down to, actually, no, he and an army of senators marched somewhere else, which I'll film from next, and took rods and sticks, and they were going to let Tiberius have it. Okay, so Tiberius Gracchus, when last we left him, the Senate, led by Nasica, his cousin, grabbed their pitchforks and torches, essentially, and marched to where Tiberius was giving a speech, a barn burner of a speech. One thing Tiberius had done that really pissed them off was he wanted to seek a second term as a tribune of the plebs. All offices in Rome, most of them were for 1 year total. It was unprecedented for a tribune to seek re-election. However, it wasn't illegal. So again, one of those things where he's bucking custom. But anyway, he's up atop the Capitoline Hill. He's got all of his supporters, his street gangs, urging him on, egging him on. But then here comes the senators. So you might think, well, why didn't the crowd protect him? Well, when you see the Pontifex Maximus and you see distinguished senators, these are folks that you yield, you give way to. So Tiberius's supporters did that. The senators go in, break up benches, and beat Tiberius Gracchus to death. So, what was that all about? Tiberius was the first domino that fell in the fall of the Republic before the Roman Empire came into being. How was that? He was a reformer, he tried to look out for the people, and he was not averse to using violence to get his way. He paved the way for Julius Caesar. So you might think that's the end of the story for Tiberius Gracchus, and I suppose for him it was. But Tiberius Gracchus had a brother. And 10 years later, well, that's a story for another trip. This well-preserved building behind me is preserved because it was turned into a church. That's a pretty common story with things that look complete. It's why we still have the Pantheon, for example. You've probably heard of the emperors Hadrian and Marcus Aurelius. Well, this was the guy in between them, a guy named Antoninus Pius and his wife, Faustina. So anyway, just kind of cool that it's still standing. All right, this is what remains of the Temple of Vesta. The Vestal Virgins, you've probably heard of. They were the most important women in ancient Rome. They tended the hearth. Vestal Virgin was selected by the Pontifex Maximus when she was anywhere between 8 and 10 years old, and they served for 30 years. The first 10 years they were training, the second 10 years they were doing, and the third set they were training other people. It was terrible if the fire went out, because the fire symbolized protection for Rome. Vestal Virgins were required to remain virgins. If they did not, if they were convicted of losing their virginity, they were buried alive. So, yeah. But they had a lot of privileges. They could own their own property. They could get married after their 30-year tour of duty. And they got prime seats at the games and theater. One quick thing. Julius Caesar. Oh boy. JSR. With the inscription, I want to show you. SPQR. Senatus Populusque Romanum. Senate and people of Rome. But the inscription below is interesting. It says, Si Julio Caesare. C was his first name, Caius. There was no J in the Roman alphabet then, so they used I's. Caius Julius Caesare is how it would have been. Caius Julio Caesare is how it would have been pronounced. And then Dictator Perpetuo. Dictator for life. Okay, I'm really out of breath because I've been climbing the Capitoline Hill. But I wanted to show you the Arch of Titus. Part of it's under restoration, but Titus and his dad Vespasian won the Great Jewish War, like AD 69 and 70. It initially began as a Jewish civil war, but then the Romans got involved. This is when the temple was destroyed. The Romans plundered the temple and took the menorah, among other treasures. Then the Jews that they had enslaved were used to build the Colosseum. All right, I'm at a place that makes me very happy. I've been excited to visit this for a long time. And why wouldn't I be excited? Because it is a sewer. But it's not just any sewer. It is the Cloaca Maxima, which you can see the little tunnel part right there. This was built in the 6th century BC, and incredibly, it is still functional. It still gets waste out of the city. And of course, because Romans have gods for everything, this honors the goddess Cloacina, who is the goddess of sewers and drains. So now you know. Good morning. Happy Sunday morning from Rome. Yeah, I'm still here. So I wanted to show you a couple of things. We'll get back to that interesting thing in just a second. Rome was a fortified city. Not for all of its history, but walls were very important in ancient times to keep raiders out. So these are a combination of the Servian walls, which were built in the 6th century BC, and the Aurelian Walls, which were built in the 5th century AD. Do I have that right? Sure, why not? And this crazy thing is a tomb. A guy named Caius Cestius. It was built in 12 BC, and it is preserved because it became part of the walls, part of the fortification. And that crenellated thing you see down there is from the 3rd century AD, and it is also part of the Aurelian Walls. All right, I want to show you something else interesting. So if you look here at these, they look like layered bricks or something. That is not bricks. Those are not bricks. I'm at a place called Monte Testaccio, and basically what those are testae, broken pieces of amphora. You probably can picture an amphora, maybe a waist level high clay vessel. They were used to store olive oil and wine primarily. You could reuse the ones that had wine in them, but you could not reuse the ones with oil because the oil would turn rancid. So they broke them up and they built this hill out of it. And this is something else. They estimate that there are 53 million pieces of amphorae. It covers 5 acres and it has a kilometer circumference, so 0.6 of a mile. So yeah, Monte Testaccio. All right, so I've talked quite a bit about emperors, maybe divinities, Vestal virgins. All of them have one thing in common: they're individuals. What I haven't talked about is a character in the story of Rome that is every bit as important as any human or god, and that is the river Tiber. Tiber is a lifeline for Rome. It connected them, perhaps it still does, to Ostia, which is their port on the Mediterranean Sea. It was critical for the importing of grain to feed the masses. and it was a very popular dumping ground for dead bodies. Tiberius Gracchus, after he was killed, dumped him in the Tiber. Same with lots of other emperors, Elagabalus, I think, and his mother, who were killed. So yeah, and it's a pretty fast-moving river. So lots of folks drowned there too when Constantine beat Maxentius at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in the northern part of the city. Dozens, if not hundreds, of Maxentius' soldiers got weighed down by their armor in the Tiber and drowned, including Maxentius himself. So, give it up, River Tiber. Hello, I am at a truly gigantic place. I am currently at the baths of Caracalla. Caracalla was an emperor. He was the son of Septimius Severus. If you'll remember, we saw his arch at the forum. Caracalla was not a good emperor. He wasn't one of the worst. The military loved him. But he was assassinated by one of his soldiers while he was taking a leak. So, but he had started this complex before he died, and his successors finished it off. It is the best preserved of the imperial baths in Rome. All the emperors basically made baths. Augustus, Trajan, Vespasian, you name it. You can see part of it's under restoration. I'll focus on this building though. So the Romans loved their baths. Roman workday started at dawn, more or less. They worked till 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then almost all of them would hit the baths. There were plenty of public baths that cost a nominal fee. There were some private baths, but you could go to the baths. It wasn't just baths. Stop saying baths. They had a library. They had a gym. You could get food. You could do some shopping. Basically, you would go. You would do a little exercise, and then a slave would coat you in olive oil and then use a strigil, this sort of scraping thing, to scrape all the oil off of you. And then you would go into the Calidarium, which was the hot pool, and then the Tepidarium, which is the warm pool, and then the Frigidarium, which was the cold pool. And, you know, you would conduct business at the baths. You could hire a prostitute, male or female. So baths were a big deal. On one hand, the Romans were hygienic. Most of them bathed every day. But in another sense, they were not hygienic at all. Of course, they didn't understand, you know, disease transmission and that sort of thing. And sometimes the recommendation, you know, if you had an open festering wound, it would be, oh, go to the baths, you know, take a dip. So, but I'm afraid the video is not doing this place justice. It is enormous. From a distance, this looks pretty much like a painting, right? It's cool that they have these, but if we get closer, you'll see that these are mosaics made up of tiny, tiny little pieces. What the Romans could do with mosaics was absolutely astounding. I mean, this place is absolutely massive. I think I said that already, but I'm doing a little closer video, zoomed in a bit, to give you a sense of that. I am dwarfed. It's very cool. You know, I never really wanted to visit these because I don't like Caracalla, but I'm glad I did. And yeah, I paid for this one. €8. No biggie. One more quick thing. You'll see in these ruins right here that there are bricks. I can go even tighter. Yeah, so you see how thin those are? And they're actually, you know, all throughout this complex. Those are telltale Roman bricks. And it looks like this set here formed part of an arch. The Romans did not invent the arch, but they certainly perfected it, and it enabled them to build colossal structures because it distributed the weight so the ceiling wouldn't cave in or whatever. All right, I want to show you a couple things. I am at the Imperial Fora, plural for forums. If you look way over there, which you can't really see, That's the site of the Roman Forum, like I said, the epicenter of Roman history. But all around here, you can't see down there either, but several emperors created their own fora. The one for Julius Caesar is over there, and perhaps the most impressive, or so we're told, is the Forum of Trajan, which are these remains we're looking at right here. And you'll see Trajan's column in the distance there. So yeah, imagine the mall on Washington, D.C., where you got the Capitol and what else is there? The White House is nearby. Imagine that wasn't big enough for the business that government needed to conduct. And so, imagine that FDR built another mall right next to that one. That's kind of what we're dealing with here. All right, so this building behind me resembles the Colosseum. In some ways, it's got the arched gates. It is not the Colosseum. No, it's not as in good of condition, for one. This is the theater of Marcellus. So Julius Caesar gets killed, right? In his will, he has adopted Octavian, his great nephew. So Octavian now takes the name Julius Caesar. So Octavian fights Mark Antony, and Cleopatra winds up taking control of the empire. The Romans hate kings, right? What do? They let Augustus Caesar, as he is later known, develop a monarchy. So, Augustus, who is Octavian, who is Julius Caesar, it's very confusing, but he had no luck with the succession. He had no male children of his own. He only had a daughter, which, sorry, was not good enough back then. So he wanted his nephew, Marcellus, to take over. And Marcellus died young, unfortunately. And so in 23 BC, Augustus commissioned this theater to be built, and it was completed in 12 BC, and was in honor of his nephew, Marcellus. All right, you can see my shadow. Hi. And I am filming the Temple of Hercules. The Temple of Hercules was built in the 2nd century BC. It is the most complete, oldest monument, and you guessed it, that's because a church took it over. And then we pan over here, I'll zoom in a bit. This is the Temple of Portunus. It was built in the 4th century BC. Portunus was the god of ports and rivers, because, of course, that's a thing. This area is called the Forum Borea. It was Rome's meat market, not in the nightclub sense, but in the sense of cattle being bought and sold. I'm not sure how far it expanded, but as I wrote last time, when Hannibal was the scourge of Italy, Romans did a very rare thing. They did human sacrifice. For whatever reason, it mandated that they bury a Gallic man and woman and a Germanic man and woman alive, because that was their thing. So, I'm not sure where that happened, but somewhere around here, and God help them, they may still be there. Hello again. I am here at the Circus Maximus. It's probably a name you've heard. Get my big head out of the shot. Basically, this is an enormous field, and you can see it kind of goes back. Where's my finger? Back all the way up there. This was the site of many events in Rome, not the least of which were the chariot races. Most people think of gladiators as the top form of entertainment. That's actually not true. The Romans were obsessed with charioteers, much like we are with professional athletes today. There were 4 primary teams. They went by colors: reds, greens, blues, and whites. And it was big business, a lot of gambling. And I don't know if you can make this out, but because I don't want to pay to get in. But at each end of this very long, football field looking thing, were these tight turns that the charioteers had to navigate. And it was not uncommon for them to crash. Sometimes the crashes were fatal. And this figure is stunning, but there were bleachers and risers all around the Circus Maximus, and it could seat 300,000 people. You heard that right, 300,000 people. This is one of the oldest parts of Rome, too. So, you know, Romulus and Remus, Romulus killed Remus, you know, shades of Cain and Abel, over who could, you know, found the city of Rome and what to call it. So he did that, and he opened it up to prisoners and, you know, ex-slaves and just the riffraff of neighboring, you know, tribes. So all those men came, and then they realized, well, we don't have any women. We need some women. So the Romans, Romulus, threw a big festival, invited all the neighboring tribes, and on a signal, his men abducted the Sabine women. This is what's known as the rape of the Sabine women. And rape in the sense of seizure, but let's be honest. So basically, the Romans took the women, you know, married them, started to have children. Meanwhile, their husbands and brothers and fathers in Sabine country plotted their revenge. So they came to attack Rome, by which point the women got in between the two warring factions and said, no, we don't want our brothers and fathers killing our husbands and our children. Please make peace. And the legend has it that they did. The Circus Maximus, one last thing, is also where the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD is said to have started. All right, so here you get a little better view of the Circus Maximus. Swing around here, you know, and it's this oval-shaped field. And it goes way down there, all the way to the end. And this building right here is the Temple of Apollo. And it was connected to Augustus Caesar's imperial palace. And we're looking at the Palatine Hill right there. So another just mammoth, amazing structure that has survived the ravages to some degree. Hello, I am coming to you from the Palazzo Barberini. I'm working on it. Anyway, this is the home of a museum, the Galleria Nazionale. They have a lot of antique stuff. It's just a cool location, and I'm shooting this greenery because this is the site of a Mithraeum. And the Mithraeum was a worship center, a temple, if you will, for the god Mithras. And I'm sorry for all the noise. My goodness, landscaping. It's like Palm Springs around here. But the Mithraeum is over here behind these partitions, and all Mithraeums were underground. What is Mithras? Who is that? He's a god, and he basically descends from the Zoroastrian tradition. It's ancient. First mention of him is around 1400 BC. Zoroastrianism is basically the second oldest religion that's still being practiced in the world, right after Hinduism. Mithras was focused on, let me say this right, tauroctony, which is bull slaying. It was very popular with the Roman military. It syncretized, kind of joined forces with the god Helios. It competed with Christianity for followers in, you know, the first and second centuries AD. It is a mystery cult, according to the Romans. And, you know, that means it has secret religious practices. Rome generally distrusted those sort of cults because they were secretive and they met and they didn't like people meeting because they thought they were going to engage in revolt and that sort of thing. So yeah, another video where you can't really see the thing I'm talking about, but it's over there and it's underground and it's a Mithraeum. Good morning. Very loud here. Happy Monday morning, though. I am at a spot where the Colline Gate stood. So the Colline Gate is important because in 82 BC, there were two factions, Sulla and Marius, and they engaged in a civil war. Sulla was the aristocrat, what they called the optimates, which means best men, so they were very, humble about it. And then Marius represented the popularity. So go back to Tiberius Gracchus, first domino, right? that led to a series of civil wars, and this was one of the most brutal. And it took place at this spot, which was the spot of the Colline Gate. Basically, it was Sulla v. Marius, and also a group of inhabitants of the center of the Italian peninsula called the Samnites. And the Samnites were intent on Rome's complete destruction. So Sulla won this battle. Sulla was the optimates aristocrat guy, and he executed a bunch of Samnite prisoners nearby, to the point where senators could hear the screams of the victims, and Sulla said, don't worry about it, it's just some criminals being punished. Basically, this civil war normalized bloodshed, and it would just get worse from here. This is exactly what it says, a historic pile of marbles. So if you've lost your marbles, they're right here. I know, I couldn't help it. I'm coming to you from an airport and looking like a weirdo recording a video while I'm here. First of all, I just wanted to thank you for watching these reels, excuse me, and these videos while I'm here. The comments and the views and the likes really mean a lot to me. My greatest fear is that I'm bothering you, but I guess you can just not watch if that's the case. If you can't tell already, I love this stuff. I could do this all day, and it is, I love top 40 music, and I love comic books and this sort of thing, but Roman history is the only thing that has kept my interest for 5 years straight. I find it endlessly fascinating, and I find it incredibly important to Western civilization, and especially what we're going through today. People ask me sometimes, are we Rome? Are we going to fall? Well, no, but also maybe. No, in the sense that we're very young. We're 250 years old this year. Happy birthday. But Rome endured for 2,000 years. And what Rome did, the Republic, a quasi-democratic form of government, transitioned to an empire, an autocratic, totalitarian state. We have not done that. At least not yet. So the comparison, I think, is a little bit early, but I think we have a lot to learn from the Romans, and I'm just grateful that you guys have indulged me on this journey, and I cannot find the bathrooms in this airport, so I have another important thing to do right now, and I'm gonna do it, and ciao ciao. Thank you. Grazie mille.